Hello class. Today we're going to look at percent of a number. Okay. The reason why we're looking at this is because we have a standard that says that you have to be able to estimate and find solutions to application problems involving percent. So in order for us to do that, we have to know how to find percent of a number. So let's do a quick review, just a small review. So what is a percent? Well, we know a percent is a comparison out of 100. Okay, comparison of part of something to 100. A percent we know is always out of 100. So that's what a percent is. All right. So how do I change a fraction to a decimal? This is what we talked about last week. So how do I change a fraction to a decimal? Remember, we just divide, top in, bottom out. How do we change a decimal to a percent? Well, if I have a decimal of 0.25, to change that to a percentage, we know we just move the decimal 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. Okay? Now what about a percent to a decimal? Well, if we have a percentage, 25%, the first thing we do is we locate the decimal. If it doesn't have a decimal in it, if you don't see one, the decimal is always at the end, and I'm going to move that decimal 2 places to the left and take off the percent sign. So 25% would be 0.25. And then last but not least, how do we change a decimal to a fraction? To change a decimal to a fraction, you just say it correctly. So if I have 0.25 as my decimal, I say that as 25 hundredths, because the 2 is in the tenths place, the 5 is in the hundredths place. So it's 25 hundredths. And then you simplify. 25 and 100 both have a 25 in common, and it simplifies to 1/4. So that's what we worked on last week. So this week we're actually working on percent equations or percent sentences. So here's our first one. What is 40% of 80? Now, this is a really easy way of doing problems. This is your typical percent question. What is 40% of 80? Okay, when you go shopping, you're looking at things that are hanging on a rack that are 25% off, 30% off. So on those questions, it's what is 25% of whatever the price is? What is 30% of whatever the price is? When you go out to eat, you leave a tip on the table. That tip is called a gratuity. And typically it is 10 to 20% of whatever your bill is. So it's what is 20% of how much you're spending. So this is our number 1% problem. So I'm going to teach you a little way of doing that today. First thing we need to do is we need to translate this question. And here's how this question translates. What is referred to as a blank. What is an equals. 40% of translates as times 80. So what we have is a math problem. 40% times 80. Now there's one problem. This 40%, I can't type it into the calculator. Our calculators are so smart that they do not have a percent sign on it. So we have to change this to a form that is more acceptable to the calculator. And the number 1 form we have is a decimal. So the first thing you need to do is change this 40% to a decimal. And we know that we find the decimal. I move the decimal 2 places over, and this is 0.40 times 80. Now what you do is you go to your calculator and you type that in. 0.40 times 80. So what is 40% of 80? 32. So the answer is 32. And that's how we're going to do our problems today. So let's try another one real quick. So here is, what is 65% of 30? So write that one on your paper, please. I'll give you a moment. Okay, the next thing we need to do is translate this problem into a math problem. Translate this question, this sentence, into a math problem. So right underneath where you wrote this problem, please write, what is our blank? Is equals, we want to turn 65% into a decimal. So where's the decimal in 65%? It's right here at the end. I've moved my decimal 2 places to the left 65% as a decimal is 0.65. Of means times 30. Now we go to our calculator and you type that in. So 0.65 times 30 equals, and you end up with 19.5. It's that simple. So let's see if you can do one all by yourself. Pause the video and answer this one. Okay, let's see how you did. Now, this one had kind of a strange percent. Were you able to figure that one out? Well, let's see. So we've got what is our blank? Is our equals. Now, 0.5%. Well, there's already a decimal in it, but is this a decimal value? No, it is not. It is a percent. It is not a decimal until you move the decimal over. So this one should be 0.005, and then of is times, and then 120. So we've got to remember that just because there's a decimal in this number, if it has a percent sign attached to it, it is not a decimal yet. It is just a percent that has a decimal in it. So I have to move that decimal 2 places to the left before it's a decimal. Then I go to my calculator and I type that in. 0.005 times 120 equals, we end up with 0.6. So you can have values that are relatively small. Now let's do one more, and then you'll be ready for your assignment. Can I have percentages greater than 100%? Sure, not a problem at all. Write this problem down in your notes, please. I'll give you a moment to copy it. Okay, here we go. So what, again, is our blank? Is our equals. Well, where is my decimal in the 140%? Doesn't have one, so that means it's at the end. So I move the decimal over 2 places. So 140% becomes 1.4. Of is times, the 8 is just 8. So I'm looking for what is 140% of 80, or excuse me, of 8, sorry. Okay, so I go to my calculator, I type that in, and I go 1.4 times 8 equals, I ended up with 11.2. How come I ended up with a value greater than what I started with? Well, the reason why is because you've got a percentage that's greater than 100%. If this were just a 100%, I would end up with 8. But because it's 100% plus 40 more percent, that means it's an 8 plus 40% of the 8. That's why we ended up with a value greater than the number that we started with. Now what you're going to do today is you're going to do an assignment that has problems just like this on your paper. So what I'm going to expect you to do is translate each one of them into a sentence, type in the information into your calculator, and come up with an answer that is rounded to the nearest tenth if you need to. Okay, so until next time.